So, Alex,
Yes.
I would introduce you, but most of the people that we know already know you. So thanks for hanging out with us.
Of course.
I guess it's unavoidable that we're at SEMA.
I know. It's been, gosh, I remember the first year was 2017, seeing you guys, and every single year made it a mission to come out and check things out. I love the booth. Everything is exciting and looks incredible, and
Thanks.
the new wheels
Appreciate
look
you.
awesome, dude. I mean, it's so cool to see every year you guys come back. You bring something new, you bring something exciting, but it feels relatable. Koenig's one of the few booths where I'm like, I walk in, I'm like, this is cool, but I could also see this working outside of the trade show.
That works.
Know?
Yeah, look, I think the secret for doing this for 40 years. I mean, this has got to be year 41, I think, for Koenig, especially at SEMA.
That's nuts.
But I think that SEMA has become one of those shows where you expect to see all the new stuff.
Yep.
But you also are kind of here to see what else is going on in the industry. Like what other things are happening, and I think that momentum is really good for the industry as a whole.
Yes.
Because innovation makes innovation, right?
Yep.
So like being able to see what a competitor does, being able to see what an ally does, and then being able to take that maybe to another level, that's what kind of has always kept our industry moving forward, right?
Yeah, I mean, a good amount of healthy competition is good. It's exactly
100%.
that, right? It's healthy. And I think one of the cool things about SEMA is if you ever want to get a temperature check on how the industry is doing, there's no better way and no better place to go than to come to SEMA and see what are people leaning towards. What are all the cars outside, right? Are they a bunch of trucks? Are they a bunch of Jeeps? Are they, Land Cruisers? Are they Corvettes? Or are they the brand new Cybertruck?
Right.
And these things, they kind of help you understand where the brands are putting their focus for the next year.
That's fair.
And then if you're kind of in a weird spot like I am, where we get to hang out with, ridiculous, silly idiots that love modifying their car just as much as we do, we get to see it from, like, the other side of the fence, the builder or the car enthusiast side. And so I get to see what the brands think those people want, and then I also get to see
what is it actually
what do the
happening
people
with.
Actually want, as we go into 25. And sometimes people are really spot on, and sometimes people miss the mark completely.
Oh my God. If I tell you about the amount of years that I think that we've had situations where, like, what was outside or what was in every booth never matched up to what actually happened or what they thought the pulse was going to be. That happens a lot when you get those crazy launch years of a certain brand new vehicle.
Yes.
You see them everywhere. Everybody's like, they're going to be everywhere.
Yeah.
And then you never see one on the street.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
So you've gotten the chance probably to walk this show way more than I have because I'm kind of locked to this. I feel like they put like
20 by 20.
They locked me down to this 30 by 30 like a hardcore. But like, so what's your overall take on, let's say, I don't want to do the show because I think that would be kind of really isolating. But like when we start talking about what's your take on kind of what you feel the industry is just based on walking around.
So I think this year it reminds me that I think a lot of people are trying to make this like huge splash in the industry.
Yeah, okay.
There are some brands that come in here and they usually introduce 1 or 2 key pieces. It's like an innovation on something that they already know is working. But I've seen more brands try to come out with like the loudest, the brightest, and the most expensive thing. And it's cool. I love it. Personally, I absolutely love Flash.
You like
just
the
as much.
You like the gaudiness of it just for the entertainment
just to
value.
see it. It's like when I remember when Dymag came and they introduced, their carbon fiber barrel. I was like, holy smokes, that's the coolest thing in the world.
Right.
And then it took less than 24 minutes. And then everybody was making 3-piece, carbon fiber wheels. And so I think that's always cool to see. But I think the one thing I was kind of hoping to see a little bit more of was, again, like more relatable builds. I do like the Supra that's here. I think that's a perfect example of like, this is a real car, in use, motorsport use. It's got the product on it, kick-ass killer, love it. Right. And then there's obviously some really cool shock value cars. But I would love to see like more GR86s, more Supras, more Zs, C8 Corvettes, things like that. Yeah. And this year it's either, Land Cruiser, or it's here's the brand new like $500,000 supercar that I've never seen before outside of making a video on. So
SEMA's always been one of those places that you could walk through a hall and you could walk by $1 million cars and never really turn your head because it's become sensory overload. Yeah, there's so many good things, but lost in the middle of maybe some of those things that personal opinion, right? Not whatever. Some of the hype builds, some of the things that have all the glitz and glamour on the outside, but maybe not enough substance in the middle. Yeah. I think that there's some really incredible builds here, regardless of what segment you're into, right? Like, I think if you're a car person, it doesn't matter if it's not maybe your typical segment that you prefer, but like you can appreciate the work and the time and the effort, and you know what craftsmanship looks like when you see it, right?
Yeah, and I think there's been a little bit of a change in the dynamic of, the SEMA trade show. So if anybody's listening in, just to kind of clear the air, the SEMA trade show is a mega city. There's different halls. The halls are the size of like my small hometown that I grew up in. I mean, these places are massive, and the walkways in between them are massive, and the parking lots in between are massive. Everything about this show, it goes on and on and on, and it's like an unnerving dream sometimes when you're trying to get out of here, trying to figure out just where the hell am I? Yeah. And so one of the things I've noticed is, Central Hall is kind of like this performance hub. It's where a lot of these performance brands sit, more on the engine tuning, exhaust intake side of things. Yeah, like hard parts. And what I've noticed is when I first came here in 2017, there was like a 50-50 split between, there's car unveils here in South Lower Hall, which is the aftermarket wheel and tire side of things.
This used to be a bubbling hall.
Yes, and then 50% of it was kind of in Central Hall in 100%. Terms of cars getting like revealed,
Absolutely.
And there have been some awesome cars revealed here at SEMA this year, today so far. But they've all been in Central Hall. So part of me is a little bummed out because like I started my whole thing in the wheel and tire, space. Yeah. It's like I would have loved to see, I remember when you hosted Beers for Builds Datsun, and that thing to me was just the raddest thing in the world. And I hope, I think the difference is South Lower, there's a lot of brands in here that are trying to make a name for themselves, where I think there are brands in Central Hall that are more so showcasing their capabilities through these people, if that makes sense. And you're getting a little bit of a different energy, a different kind of person.
I think a lot of the hall that's changed and some of the things that we're seeing, especially on the wheel segment, from people that are displaying at the show. I want to be like, I don't want to put it as an industry thing. Yeah. I think this show may not be representative of the entire wheel and tire industry. Just because a company's not here
doesn't mean they're not. Yeah.
Right. Doesn't mean they're dead.
Yes.
Right.
Yep.
So, but I think what's interesting is you have a lot of smaller companies, whether they be a lot of forge companies, different things like that are kind of newer to the game. And the one thing that I'll tell people out there, and I don't know if you'll agree, you don't have to agree, but like, look, there's always going to be new brands that are going to pop into the wheel industry. And when they do, you typically have that 3-year run where the hype can really drive them, and they're a company that's scaling and really becoming bigger. And then after 3 years, they have to become a real company. Yes. They have to, deal with overheads. They have to deal with real things. They have to deal with extending their brand on beyond the hype that it had, and actually building a program and working with people to sell the brand or figuring out a way to sell it themselves, right? Yep. So I think you have one of those years where you've seen a lot of those new companies come in. Some of the older companies that we're used to, the brand names, the mom and pop companies that were privately owned at one point, they're not really here, and that makes the hall feel a little empty. Yeah, maybe like almost like we're waiting for something. We're reminiscing that what it used to be like.
It's tough because it's like when you come to an event, there's these like these things that happen at the events that it becomes known for. Right. Whether that is Toyota or Ford or Mopar doing something, they kind of become this part of the show. Yeah. And so in its own way, the vendors also, I think, sometimes become part of the 100%. Show when they become so invested in something. And so I think the whole aftermarket segment is in a little bit of like a transition period.
There's a lull spot happening.
There's a lot of different things. 2020 hit a lot of brands super hard. 2021 and 2022, you could have, half a brain, no eyes, and you could be making millions of dollars.
100%.
And then all of a sudden, it ended, right? And so all these companies are running around like a chicken with their head cut off. They're making all these changes. They're making changes to marketing or sales or operations or PSYOP, and it's like, that's all great. But it does leave a little bit of like this lull, kind of like right after you get done having a stomach ache where you're not hungry, you're not sick, but
you feel like I need to eat something.
Feel like you should be doing something, right? And so I think that's where 2024 has kind of felt for a lot of brands. That's the thing for us, and what we do on our side of the fence is we help brands with this sort of thing. But with all the brands that we've helped in 2024, like the number one feeling I always get back from brands is it just has kind of felt like, let's just try to make it this year, and I think next year will be just a little bit better.
Yeah, and I think that's the hope all the way around. And the one thing I think that I always try to say, and I've said it before on different lives, podcasts, whatever it may be, is that I think people get this view that, oh, it's great. It must be good for one company when another company goes out or bankruptcy or all these different things. But the answer is it's not. Mm-hmm. Like, it's super. You have to understand, like, from an industry standpoint, there's a lot of momentum that happens from companies being able to work automotive around because they like the segment. Mm-hmm. when those companies disappear from the space, there's a lack of momentum, right? And so, you know, it's not a good thing, and it's hard watching some of the brands that we grew up with maybe not really be as present as they once were.
It's kind of like, I don't know, I'm always more so focused on like analogies, but it's like NFL wouldn't be as big if it only had 4 teams.
Right.
No matter how awesome the 4 teams are,
right. You're not going to get everybody to watch.
Not everybody wants to watch those 4 teams,
That's
you know,
right.
and I think at least there's certain generations that love come-up stories. They love to hear, you know, see a brand succeed and grow. But I think there is a point in this, at least in this show, and in South Lower Hall specifically, where it's important to read the room, see what's going on, and see what's either kind of hype and really exciting, or what's more realistic and where do you think people are going to grab. Right. And that's where I think, you know, one of the closest things that we do with like Martini Works is I walk around, I say, you know, what's flash and what's maybe more where I think the direction is going.
Where's their actual substance? Where's the real part that's going to be used over and over again? It's not the glitz and the glamour, it's the real stuff, right?
And I think there's an element of that. You know, we talk about wheels, for instance, and it's like when Koenig released, you know, the forged wheel line, the very first place I went to go look was the wheel fitments. Because what I wanted to understand was, you know...
Who are they catering this to?
Yeah, who's Koenig making these for? Because if Koenig's going to make these things for supercars and all this crazy stuff, I'm like, that's cool, but that's just another exciting glitz and glamour thing. And then I saw the sizes that it was coming in, and I'm like, okay... This is good. You know, this is coming in a size that I could show my friend in Appleton, Wisconsin, that's got an A90 Supra or is picking up a new Z or is going to have, you know, they want to get their first drift car and they want to get some cool set of wheels. And it's like, sick. This works. There's a sense of relatability to the product, and that relatability, to me at least, as somebody who like sells stuff outside of talking really fast, like that's important to me.
Well, I think for us with the Forge line, one of the biggest things that we had was not only being able to continue the DNA up from whatever we've always done, but I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that we're looking for that graduation, right? For example, like we have a lot of racers now. I mean, we do a lot of race vehicles, a lot of motorsports, right? And in those motorsports, you have guys that are asking for different products. And we have built relationships with them, and we have built, you know, kind of this, even if they don't have a relationship with us personally, they have this ability to have formed a trust level with our product and what they run, and kind of gone through the gauntlet of the stuff that they've had and realized they've had a good experience with it. So we had people saying, well, what are you guys going to do? Would you do Forge? Would you do something different? And we, you know, we kept it on the back burner for a while. We had done some stuff in some other realms, and ultimately we decided we want to do that. And we did add some things. For example, motorsport stuff on the Porsche side. We did some Corvette.
Yeah, because
like
you have the 5L130 stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we did go into places, but again, that's not your Porsche typical guy that's going to be spending all the big dollars, right? These are like, you know, some of the Caymans, the Boxsters. You're going to have the 997 cars because they're becoming affordable for guys like us.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's, at the end of the day, that's what we want, especially with like wheels and tires. There's two different groups of people that are buying wheels, right? There are the people that are looking for that flash, that glam, and usually the platform would match that style. And there are some people that are looking for something to say, I know that when I put these on my car, I'm not going to have to worry about these things ever again.
Right.
And that's two completely different human beings.
100%.
And so for me personally, it's like I kept looking at it from 2017 to now, and it's like flow forming wheels were the hot, you know, craze, and they still are. But eventually, that's going to become standard fare, in my opinion.
I agree with you.
I think there's a point where that technology just more so becomes
a better product.
It's just a better product, you know? And I think where people are looking is saying, when is the next affordable step in the right direction coming? And so forged wheels, I think, are the answer, but they've always been $3,000 or $4,000 or $5,000. And finally now, since they're coming in the smaller sizes, you're seeing, I think, what, $560 a wheel, $700 a wheel, so that puts you
depending
to
20, on sizes, right? Like if you're getting entry level stuff that comes in right in that $2,200 for set. And I think that you're starting to see some of the bigger stuff that maybe traditionally had been going for $4,000 or $5,000 because it was 19-inch bigger stuff for certain cars now become in the $3,000 range, right?
Which is still nuts.
No, and I agree. And here's the thing: I'm still a big, I think it's illogical to think that as a wheel company, maybe there would be an upsell there. But that's not really what we do. I think they're two different people.
Yes.
Like, honestly, I still really enjoy running flow form wheels all the way around. I think people get confused that there's a pro and a con to everything.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And there's a lot of nuance to which product you choose for your car and what your use is. And Flowform not only is a great bang for the buck, but I also think for the average person, it's going to give you a lot of great benefits and product things that you get a fractionally a marginal increase from a traditional cast wheel.
I agree. I think most people when most people are looking at wheels these days, they're looking for help to understand what should matter to them. Like, what is the most important thing to them? Right. And outside of, like, design and price is obviously the most important, but, like, that's where we have a tendency to help. And I think that's where Koenig sometimes, it steps in very well for those conversations, because there's so many different models that exist across an onslaught of different fitment ranges, but the benefit of it being it's flow formed, it's still light, it's still strong, it still has a little bit of that sport tuner look or a little bit that Euro look, but it's not too much where it becomes the whole personality of the car.
Right.
This design helps make that a little bit better, and I think that's where you guys have seen so much success. Now with the Forge stuff, it's going to be really exciting to see how it does, because it is, I think, the next step, but it's also a big step for people to take.
Right. I also don't think that we've ever intended, nor do we intend now, for Forge to all of a sudden take over what we're doing. We're not trying to do that. That's not really the game that we're playing. I think the Forge stuff has a spot for the right people that can not only afford it, because I think budget has to be a thought process in it, but also for the people that really want the use for it. Now, I'm not saying that people won't use it because they like the style or design, and I mean, look, that's been done forever. Every person that's put a Volk wheel on their car, work wheel, there's two types of people that use them, right? There's the people that legitimately are using them. They're lighter, they're stronger, whatever it may be, but then there's also the people that want to have that brand equity, that brand status piece, and I think there's nothing wrong with either way as long as you can afford it and it's what you want to do for your build, right? I think you said something pretty interesting before, only because, like, there's been a lot for you on the Martini Works side this year. You, like, I mean, seriously, like, you have gone from, you know, kind of being active more in the social media presence to now building a performance business. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Okay. And in addition to that, you also have agency stuff and different things like that. So you have a lot going on. But the one thing that we were talking about earlier, which I think is cool to, like, talk about here, is that, you know, we align synergistically from a brand perspective because you're trying to make sure that your customer is always first. You're giving them the product that makes sense for them, the functionality for them, that it matches. You're selling them something not because you have to sell something for $1, but because you inherently want to give them the best experience and the right product for their car. And that's really what you have been really vocal about since the beginning with Martini Works, right?
Yeah. I mean, for us, it's kind of been, like, I was raised in Wisconsin. Like, the Midwest nice thing is, like, a very real thing.
You're putting Appleton on the map, though.
Yeah. But, like, even when I was young, I remember, like, as a kid, it always made me so uncomfortable when I felt pressured to buy something, no matter what it was. Like, when I was a kid, I hated it. Whenever I was called on, I hated the pressure of like being forced to choose something because somebody's trying to convince me that it's a good thing. And so as I got older and I got more vocal about that, I didn't like that. And so when we started Martini Works, one of the biggest things that I wanted to do was kind of flip it on its head and say, I don't want you to pressure anybody to buy anything. What I want you to do is I want you to help them figure out what their need is and treat that more important than anything else. Because if you help them as a friend, they will buy what they will buy, and that's important. We're not making that choice for them. I don't want anyone to ever have buyer's remorse. I don't want anyone to come back and say, I didn't want this, or this looks ugly, you know, blah, 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 blah. You know, and that's come back to us, and it's paid for itself in dividends, because at the end of the day, we just want to help people modify their car. And we're super passionate about this industry. We absolutely love wheels and tires. You know, we love the performance stuff. We lean on some incredible drivers to help us find out, you know, what works best. And then we run the products ourselves. You know, we have Koenigs on our cars. You know, we partners with Continental and Michelin. We run their tires. We run, you know, everything. And we beat the ever-living crap out of it. And so for us, we don't necessarily want to force somebody to purchase it. Obviously nice. We like the money.
But
for us, it's like, we're going to give them 3 choices based on what they told us, and we're going to let them pick what's best. And when they have questions, we'll be here along the way. Even if you bought it 6 years ago, if you bought it 6 months ago, shoot us a message. We're still here. We're still doing the same thing.
We're not going anywhere. I think that's like a huge piece. Like, you know, like even like when we do lives like every Wednesday, like, you know, before we do our podcast, right? And I just think, like, sometimes you'll have 9 people, and then there's other time you'll have 50 or 60, right? And they're not big numbers, but to me it was always important that we have a brand transparency and an ability where every Wednesday at 2 p.m., they know where they can find us. If you're having an issue, a problem, if you have a question, if there's something there, you can come ask us. We'll answer it. Like, we're not going to avoid it. I think there's a level to that, to being able to make sure that your customer is you're able to help your customer before and after the sale, right? Because it's not about the sale. No. We're car people. Like, we want to build cool cars. We want to help people build cool cars, right? Martini Works, you guys are doing more than just wheels now.
Yep.
You're starting to get involved in, where do you see Martini Works kind of going?
So the big thing for us, the big thing that we want to do in 2025 is continue to build out a place where the website feels like a community. Okay. It feels like a home. You know, we've reintroduced the concept of build threads, which is a place where people can upload their car, they can share their story, photos, videos, parts lists, you know, recommendations, things like that. We want that to become a home for people. We want people to be able to vote on the build threads. We want to be able to people ask questions to these owners to say, hey, I have a Supra. You posted the Supra.
I see you have these products.
Yeah.
Like, what are they good?
How did you, you know, deal with this? And what we want to do is we want to build a place where if you answer those questions and you help those people, you have like a reward system for that. You get to be a part of this community for fostering more people to modify their car. And so for us, that's our focus. And, you know, we specialize in wheel and tire packages, we specialize in suspension, and we also help on the performance side. But we want to make sure that we're there no matter what it is. And if we're not expertise in a certain thing, like we get questions all the time. Hey, I'm looking to turbo my, you know, my EK. And it's like, that is awesome. Right now, we don't have the subject matter expert for that. Let me give you to a shop that I know does good work, right? Because at the end of the day, that person's looking for help. Just because we may not be able to help them doesn't mean that they don't need help. No, it just means 100%. That we may not be the one to help them, right? And so that's the goal of 25. Continue to do that. Continue to have the podcast. Keep going to car shows. Keep trying to build stuff, and hopefully continue to pay our bills and hire our friends.
Paying your bills is an underrated thing that's very important. Your website does some things that I think is unique to a lot of the other wheel and tire websites that we've seen before, right? I've vocally at some points even made comment about where I'm struggling a little bit, but you do something that's honestly, I don't believe it's been done by any wheel and tire. So basically, for those that are not familiar, first off, you should go to martiniworks.com and you should check out the website, because I think that you'll find it to be a pretty friendly type thing. I'm not plugging. We didn't have anything here.
This isn't paid, I promise.
But when it comes down to it, you're introducing a label that people can search by, a filter. Where they're able to decide between inspired design, replica design, or the original design. And these three designations are basically used for you to provide guidance to people, just so they have some sort of information about how you feel the wheel is classified within a segment amongst all other wheels out there.
Yeah, so that was something we launched back in June of last year, and we've been refining it ever since. And really, that was the goal, right? We launched this site, Lars and I did, and you know, we're trying to make these distinctions. And I'm like, what are people having the most trouble with?
Right.
And I go out there, and the number one thing people get wrong, and they don't mean to get wrong, it happens. Is wheel design origination. You know,
because we're talking about the term basically rep wheels.
You know,
rep wheels.
If a wheel is under $1,000, automatically a rep. Or you post something on Reddit, it's like, I got these new wheels, and like, oh, it's a rep. And you say, well, what's it a rep of, right? And they don't know. It's just this weird stigma that's in the aftermarket wheel industry. And so I said, well, here's what we'll do. We will define it to the best of our ability. We'll reach out to our partners in Japan, in Europe, and the U.S. We'll give them the definitions. We'll see what they send back. And let's just see what we get made here. And so we did. We worked through, I think, 7 or 8 iterations of the definitions. We defined them all, and we put them on the website, and we said, here's how we're going to define them. Because nobody has yet figured this out. We think we can figure this out. Because when it comes to knowing wheels, I'm willing to put my head on a hill and say, I'm willing to fight about this a little bit. And so that's what we did. So a replica design in our label of the Wheel Verifier tool is a wheel design that carries greater than 80% of its design elements with a previously engineered wheel, which is still currently in production. And so we look to see if that original wheel is still made. If the wheel is no longer made,
You're giving them a pass.
You can't necessarily hold on to a design when the company doesn't exist anymore. A really classic example would be like the Regamaster that made a wheel. It was iconic, stopped making the wheel, and then became so popular because another manufacturer designed a similar wheel that Regamaster came back and started making it again.
I mean, listen, I can't say I hate that, though.
You know what I mean? So that's one of those situations. And so for us, that was important. And then we have an inspired by design. And inspired by design is right around the 40 to 80% mark, where we're saying they're both still in production. They carry some similarities, but there's enough of a difference in spoke design, hub design, lip design, or technology in terms of cast or flow formed or forged that we think it can share a little, but we don't think somebody's just taking wheel 1 and making wheel 2.
I understand.
And then finally, the original wheel design. That one's the toughest nugget to crack, and that's what we're saying is you're carrying less than 30% of a design element. It's seen as the original in the industry. It's got ties to motorsport use. Motorsport is huge for us because otherwise every 3-piece wheel designed randomly in a basement would qualify as an original wheel. So we want to see that it's supported. We want to see that it's active. Yeah. And that's how we've done it. And so it's been great, but it's also caused a lot of concern.
Well, listen,
for obvious reasons.
Right. And I was a piece of that concern, I think, for a moment. But so here's my take on it, because I think the full explanation is fair. Yeah. First off, I have trouble with the term rep wheel. For the people that want to go, it's because you are a rep wheel. Yeah. Then I'm never going to win you over, so I'm not going to even try. Yeah. So the other piece of it is that I have, in the wheel industry, when we hear the term replica design, we are thinking OE replica design. OE replicas. Those are the things that you go when you wreck your wheel on your Maxima. Yeah. And you go to these companies, Transwheel, Wheels America, whatever it may be, and you buy a wheel that looks exactly like, but may not be the OE type build or whatever they are, and you buy those wheels. So from a replica standpoint, that's what we say by replica. Now, the term rep wheels, to me, has always been a really challenging one, and here's why. It's because I don't believe that it's ever really used, and you kind of touched on this before, in a way of basically ever looking at anything more than a derogatory tone, right? And I think the problem with that is that when you say rep wheel, I think people have to be really clear about what that means. There are some companies that their entire, and they do it on purpose, not an accident. Yes. Right? Their entire job is to make a cheap, affordable wheel that looks exactly like another wheel that's currently in the aftermarket segment. Yep. And do it at a more affordable price, and they are not ashamed of it. In fact, that's their whole model. Yeah. Yeah. I think that that's a hard distinction to be able to carry on to other wheels, to be able to say that that's a rep wheel, right? Yes,
so we ran into this issue because we were going to have a fourth definition, which was essentially like fake,
Biter.
Right? Which is that. It's like, and you don't have to go far to see it, but it's like there are wheel companies out there that's all they're doing.
But that's their business model.
That is their business.
And you can argue whether it's good or bad.
They make a lot of money.
Right. And so, but with that said, I mean, I think that, and look, I'm going to be the first one to say this. I think there was a point in Koenig's history, and you've touched on it in different videos with little tiny things, that there was a little bit more of inspired, and I think that was really big. There was a time where you had brands, let's say Rhoda or something like that. It becomes iconic in my head. Yeah. And that was a big focus that they did, and maybe they've evolved and moved past certain things, and I think there was a period where maybe that happened, but I would say north of 2015. Well, that's the we have never we've been so adamant about designing as much as we could from scratch and bringing all the engineering in house and all these different things. But it's a tough distinction, I think, from people to let go of what was and what is.
Yeah, and I think for us, there's two ways that we go about this, because one of the benefits of being on the Martini Works side and then having the firm on Meta Martini's side is I have sides where I get to speak to these brands as I'm talking as if I was part of that wholesale side of things. But then I also have Martini Works where I feel like we're responsible for kind of like the voice of the consumer. And so I'm trying to bridge the gap between the reality of how they see things compared to the industry and how they distribute things, because how they speak about these two subjects are completely different. And what we just try to do is we try to create an on-ramp for that discussion. Yeah. And so what we've done is we've said, hey, listen, we have these wheels. In our opinion, we really don't want to add wheels on the website to which we think they're purposely trying to take away from another wheel brand. If we notice that, if we see that,
that's not what you're looking to sell.
Yeah, we're picking one. We're picking the one that we think is doing it right, and the other one is not going to be in the catalog, because we don't want to have that. But at the same time, we're just a group of dudes that have limited amount of experience. We think it's pretty cool amount of experience, but it doesn't amount to the collective experience of Koenig, for example, to say, hey, here's what we've got. Yep. Here's how we have things labeled. Here's our definitions, clear as day. Yeah. If you think you're wrong, or if you think we're wrong, tell us. Right. Send us a message. Say, hey, we saw this. We need to understand why you did that. Yeah. And it's like, cool, we'll send it to you, because we keep track of every single wheel that we think it was inspired by, or we think it's a replica of. Yeah. And we send that to you and we say, here it is. Here's why we thought that. If you have anything that tells us differently, let us know. We'll take it off. Yeah. Clear as day. Because we're not going to get it right every single time. But there are brands that have reached out to us and said, hey, I don't really agree with that. And I'll say, okay, what do you got? And they'll send us the wheel model, and I'll say, well, I hear you, but homie, that's it's from the 1997 magazine that I got when I was a kid. That wheel was on the cover of the same magazine. We probably bought it at the same time. So we don't do it to. And the thing for us on the Martini Works side is like the label, and we called it a wheel verifier tool, because we are still trying to figure out. We don't want it to be an indication that the wheel is made of poor quality. Right. We want people to understand that from a design element, here's where the design, heritage is coming from. Right. We also introduced with that construction at the same time, because we want people to see if it's a low pressure cast or gravity cast or flow form or forged or multi-piece. They have to take both of those pieces of information and decide if that's something that they're willing to do. Right. Do they want a inspired by design that's forged, that's affordable? Kick ass, do it. Do you want something that's original, but it's gravity cast or low pressure cast, and you had no idea you were going to pay $3,000 for a low gravity cast or low pressure cast wheel? Now, does that make sense? Do you want a 28-pound wheel?
So it reminds me of some of the... So for people that like... They've heard me say multiple times, I despise three-piece wheels. Now, let me provide context. We did three-piece wheels. I despise them because a lot of the early three-piece stuff was aluminum spun barrels, okay? When you put an aluminum spun barrel on anything, you always, if you look at it the wrong way, it will bend. Yeah. And that's a lot of the early stuff. And not to mention they were all sealed by hand. Yep. I'm not just talking about our stuff. I'm talking about all the early stuff. It was sealed by hand. It had the silicone thing. Every couple of years, your wheels would just randomly start leaking. You'd have to take them all apart. And look, there's people that are about that. And the best part of a three-piece wheel is the fact that you can customize offsets and lips and all that good stuff. But, when I start to think about construction quality and different things, there's always going to be pros and cons to every build process, right? So it's like interesting to see the consumer be able to really try to hone in on what do these things mean for them in their use process, right?
Yeah, for me, I think three-piece wheels, they have their home. I love them because I just think they look really cool. I mean, functionally,
I think they can. Yeah. I've seen some stuff that I think is questionable.
Well, yeah. I mean, just because you can throw something in CAD
you should.
And you can have a Haas machine whip it up for you, in a day or two. It's like, it doesn't mean it's good. And that was one of the toughest things with the filter, because we had another situation with that, which we had a three-piece wheel company that came out and they said, well, you can't label that because these designs have never been done before. And I said, well, my guy, making four and making them as sophisticated as they are, they're not tested. Yeah. They're not likely JWLVIA approved. Right. This is just something. This is just something that you thought was rad, and I think that that's cool. Right. But that doesn't. The price of a product does not automatically determine the quality of that same product. And that's something that we've always fought for with people. And where I think so many of, even after we've released the filter, we've talked about 1,000 different brands. Yeah. For us, when it comes down to it, is I always hear from the customer at the end of the day, like, I went with some Koenig ampliforms. Or something. I went with some hypergrams. I went with some ultragrams. And it's like, well, why? They look good. They're lightweight. I knew they're portable. They're in stock.
Problems. Yeah,
and it's simple. Right. Because what it comes down to, for at least for us, is we want you to when you unbox that, nothing's a surprise. Yeah. We want you to be excited for the sake of being excited. We don't want you to be nervous. We don't want you to be worried. We don't want you to have buyer's remorse. We don't want you to have, because that sucks. Because as being a car enthusiast, you're already practically broke just trying to do car stuff. Yeah. That we don't want you to then feel bad for trying to enjoy your hobby. We just want you to enjoy your hobby. Simple as that. And so we're willing to have that fight with things and have some fun with it. And I mean, even have the dialogue with brands on when we get it right or wrong. But we still think, above all else, the people who build their cars for 2025 and beyond, the next generation that's coming in, they need that level of transparency and authenticity more than ever before.
Yeah.
While so many of these brands are getting eaten up and gobbled up and spit out through Chapter 11 bankruptcies.
Which is crazy.
It's just, it's silly. And so for us, we're like, hell,
yeah,
let's do it, because then at least we know we're trying to do it in the way that we think is best.
Right. Yeah, I mean, so I think some of the things that I think I've always struggled with the label thing, when we've spoken about this briefly, right? So I think the hard part is, like, even if you look at the design process, like, there's plenty of times that we will just do designs. We usually try to keep the opinion pool small at first. We do designs, and when we feel we're like, we're getting somewhere. Yeah, we'll bring, like, sales guys in, different things like that. And there's always that one guy in the back of the room that goes, but doesn't it kind of look like... Yeah. Because you could not look at any inspiration and still come out with something. Because we have had, arguably 60-plus years of wheel development designs in a modern way, to the point where people are going to... I mean, think about how many wheel companies there have been and will be. Yeah. And how many different designs. So there's always going to be something. But I think that, people really have to push harder into looking at some of these designs, because just because the proportions are similar doesn't mean that it's a replica or a copy. Yeah. Because you can have, I can think about even Japanese wheels companies, right? Mm-hmm. There is plenty of wheels, whether it be Advan to Volk, that when you put them up, CE28 to, maybe whatever.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
you're like, that looks pretty similar.
I mean, we just had this the other day, I mean, that is the tough part with the dialogue, is how do you separate it to even break out what you think is the quality versus what the actual quality is? And the answer is it's hard, but that doesn't mean it shouldn't be done. You can't continue to let the shadow of vagueness, cloud a consumer, because that's how you get a lot of people fighting on the internet, and you get people disagreeing. And it was a conversation I had just on another wheel. We unboxed this gorgeous Volk 21A.
Okay.
I mean, it's a gorgeous wheel. One piece, looks kick-ass, and expensive as hell.
Well,
and I'm looking at the design, and I'm like,
I feel like I've seen this before.
That's a BBS LM mesh style face, is what that is. And so I started looking at the design. So I pull a BBS LM off the wall, and I put it right next to the other wheel, and I'm measuring the spokes, and I'm looking at the side, and I'm looking at this, and I go online and I look on the internet, and I hear all these fancy marketing terms for this iconic mesh style design that was captured in 1986. But I'm like, you are trying everything you possibly can to say that this is not a German-inspired LM design. Right. But at the end of the day, it is, and no matter which way you swing it, there's only so many ways you can make a 6-spoke. There's only so many ways you can make a 5-spoke.
Yeah.
And we get that. For me, I think what's important is understanding that it's okay that there's another 5-spoke, and it's okay that there's another 6-spoke, because those two wheels, a 6-spoke and the 6-spoke you're probably thinking of, have different audiences, different price points, different technology, different everything. You can't put a $4,000 wheel in a boxing ring with a $280 wheel and expect the same outcome. You just can't do that.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think 90% of the time that's the case, right?
Yeah.
Because I think that once you start to get into things, look, I also think that it's hard, because I think the lack of comparing apples to apples in this industry exists.
Yeah.
People are comparing apples to pears, and they're like, well, but they're the same, and they're not. Round doesn't mean same, right? So, I mean, it's interesting to see what you're doing. I also think that, while the term rep wheels is used in a derogatory nature, the term you're using of replica design wasn't intended for a derogatory nature. It's intended for kind of basically saying, hey, look, this looks like other wheels out there. If you're looking for something that's totally off the wall, this may not be your guy. But, I think the problem that I always have with it, and it's similar that we've had with other things, is that when you start talking about the nature of wheels and you say 0 to 30%, that 30% is subjective, right? It's like scoring, doing drifting, right? Yeah. No matter how hard they try to add different pieces in to basically take the subjectiveness out of, judging the sport, as long as it's a judged sport, there'll always be that subjectiveness nature, right? But I think like you said before, where you guys are going is about more for the customer in the informative way. And you'll keep tweaking it.
And for us, it's we know that it's not a perfect solution, but it's a changing animal. And for us, we have the opportunity now where we say, dealers have a voice to reach out to us and say, hey, I want to talk to you about this wheel. You labeled it this way. I want to know why. We also have it on the completely other side where we may label something a original wheel design, but our audience, our people that have build threads,
looks like this.
Exactly. They can go out and they can say, hey, I noticed that you labeled this wheel from 1997, an original wheel. Just so you know, this wheel came out in 1994 over here, made by this guy, and I think you should just go take a look at it. So we have, again, kind of like that sandwich model I was talking about before, where we get to kind of hold ourselves to an even higher level of accountability where we got to make sure we're telling the truth to you guys and being willing to even have that battle with you guys, but then also having that battle with the audience. But we think that by doing that, we actually open the door to what needs to happen, which is the conversation to say, what do you think? Right. Because they may say, no, that's an original wheel design. And they get to vote, and if we see enough votes come through that say, no, that is the original wheel design, we may change our label on it depending on, hey, guys, I think we have this one wrong. We should go back and we should fix it. You know, and that's the goal is like, we're not ever trying to come in. The whole concept of Martini Works is not to come in and like tell people what to do to their cars or what the right way versus the wrong. Our goal is to just educate and help. And the goal by doing that is that by the time you're done with it, you trust us enough to buy a set of wheels from us. Right. And if you can do that, and if we can have that conversation together,
then we're going in the right place.
Oh, absolutely.
And look, and just for the record, I didn't go to Appleton and try to hit him with a baseball bat. We didn't have a disagreement. But when the label came out, I think there's certain wheels that, like, even looking at it from not even our brands, there were certain things I looked at. I was like, well, how could that be? Yeah. And I think I shot you an email, and you were like, yeah, but this is what we're trying to do, and this is whatever. But we've never made any attempt to try to change labels. I think it's just interesting.
Yeah, we love the dialogue, and I love that it's actually brought us closer to our dealers than ever before, because now there's a sense of accountability and transparency across the board, and it works really well for brands like Koenig that are willing to have the conversation about certain things compared to other companies who never wanted to have that conversation to begin with, and now that they feel like they're being outed. Yeah. And I think for that's helped us as a company say, maybe that brand that we had on board,
that wasn't the right one.
Maybe that wasn't the right one.
And it's like when I start to think about like your label system, I think the one thing that I like, and I've never thought about the idea of writing to you and saying, hey, I disagree with that or whatever it is, only because like I don't know that I care. Yeah. Not because I don't think the labels are good. I don't know that I care because, like, at the end of the day, my goal is never going to change. Like, our goal is to sit down and try to make the best wheel designs that we can. We have in-house engineers. We sit there. We try to find every little radius, and we try to find the way to remove the weight and improve whatever we can. And, and we're trying to always make a design from scratch, right? We don't start with inspiration. We don't sit down and go, I love this wheel. Let's try to make a copy of it and change it 20%. Like, we don't do that. Like, but inherently, like I said, there's plenty of time. There's plenty of wheels. I can give you folders full of wheels that we have scrapped just because even though we thought the design was super good, when we get done with it, somebody says, that looks just like, and when we go look at it, we're like, you're right.
Shoot, yeah.
And it's not because we looked at anything, just because of the nature. When you try to make a 6-spoke, 7-spoke, 5-spoke, whatever it's going to be, the idea that you can get so drastically far apart sometimes doesn't exist. Yeah.
And the detail is getting, I think, a little bit more intricate. I think one of the first things I did, even when I saw some of the new forged wheels, is like, I looked at it, I counted the spokes, I looked at the hub bore, but then I looked inside and I saw the side milling, I saw the side, the side work that you do. I see that you're adding more design to the step lip, and you're trying to do some fancy stuffs with how the tapered spoke ends. And it's like, those are little things that, for us, it's the right step. It's the good step. It's the stuff that we're seeing that the one-piece wheel community, like, they have to do. Because there's only so many ways you can push back a 5-spoke. There's only so many ways you can push forward a split 7-spoke. Yeah. And for us, the nerd in us is constantly trying to say, how can we put this wheel in the best light as possible? Yeah. But then on the flip side, I'm always saying to myself, how do I make sure that somebody on the internet doesn't come to our website and feel like we're trying to pull a fast one over them?
No, that makes a lot of sense. I think, it's funny. It's like, even just for what you say with the details, the only reason I'm even bringing this up because I think people might find this interesting, or maybe I'm the only one. But basically, like, the way we've started to do forged wheels now is we basically go into these things and we strip out all the weight. We know what kind of the basic design is, and then we strip out all the weight. So we end up getting these really rough shapes. Like you look at that, the new F6 SX. Yeah. Basically, like, you see that inner channel that kind of goes on the drop center there?
Yeah.
Well, so that started out as, hey, we have some extra material. We could take that extra material out. We don't need it. There's FDA's looking good, all this different things. So it started as like this weird step lip thing, and then we had to make it look nice.
Yeah.
And so it comes, we can continue it down this way. But like, we're starting with a functional base first and then trying to bring the style back into it. And that's sometimes it's tough, and sometimes it works out, and sometimes we spend 6 months chasing our tail.
Yeah.
Like,
I think that's what makes Koenig, though, especially when you started to release the Flowform lineup that you guys have. I mean, that was really the first big step of showcasing to people, hey, look at how light we can make these wheels. Look at the colors that they can come in and the design elements that they can come in and the price.
Yeah.
And that was rad.
Yeah.
And everything that came out after that followed the very same recipe where it was like, it looked like it was functional first, and then you went through and you made it a pretty wheel. And that's why when I saw the forged wheels for me first, that was one of the first things I looked, because there's so many. I mean, we can walk through this hall.
I know.
Everybody's trying to make forged wheels now. Everybody in the mother.
Here's the thing, and I think that's great. Mm-hmm. I think that at the end of the day, a consumer needs to be able to find the brand that not only matches up with their use and their function, but also that they can find the people that are able to build wheels that they know that they're going to be there, right? Yep. There's a long history of our brand, but there's also a long history of a lot of other brands. And like, you really have to look at, do they care about what you're doing? Are they in the segment? Are they making good product? Are they making reliable product? Do they stand behind their product? Are they going anywhere?
Yeah.
I think that's a big element to any parts that you buy, right? I think about it with turbos. Think about it. There's a lot of different, I don't want to say Chinese turbos, so I won't say Chinese turbos. But there's some turbos out there, maybe from other countries.
Yeah.
Could be in Asia. I'm not sure. But what I'm saying is, like, there's brands that you know. You go to Garrett, you go to Precision, you go to some of these places, and you just know they've been doing it for a long time. You trust these. You've seen them run in the cars. And then there's other brands that maybe are newer to the scene, and maybe some of them will be great.
Yeah,
we don't know.
I think that's because so many brands nowadays are just trying to push as fast as they can in the market. I think that's the biggest issue that I've seen personally is, you know, I see this, especially this influx of like people talking about like Alibaba parts. All these parts are from Alibaba, blah, 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 Alibaba. And it's like the concept of being worried about that compared to the reality of it is a little twisted. And the way that I say it is this. There are brands out there that spend a ton of time on R&D, that spend a ton of time on real-world application. They try to get the right part. Yeah. They try to build the right thing. They do, and they figure it out, and it gets locked in. And then they outsource components that they have to from Thailand or China or Asia or whatever. This is a
good point.
Right?
Yeah.
And those parts come back. Does that mean that the part itself is garbage?
Not necessarily.
Exactly, right? Because what's happened is all the R&D, the development, and the production of the product happened. Yeah. It's been tested. It got outsourced to get its components made. It's come back. It's gotten reassembled. Just because it came from that country as a component does not necessarily mean that it's a bad component. But what happens is these new brands are coming in, and they're not sourcing a component. They're sourcing the entire product from the factory. Yep. And what they're getting is a crazy exhaust in a crazy color, and they're claiming that they do all their all their R&D in-house, all of their fitment in-house. And all of that's bullshit. Yeah. And so people are so quick to call on it, but now they've come too sensitive to it, where now they call out anything that's made from China as being bad. And it's like, well, no. What's bad is when people try to skip the step. And the step that everyone skips is often the hardest part, and that's the development of a full comprehensive product. Yeah. Why would I go through the work of developing my own exhaust for a Supra if I can go online, I can find a factory that's already made it, I can rebrand it in a different thing, and they can TIG weld my own little logo on it, and I'll sell it for $6,000 even though it costs $400 to get FOB to America. Yeah. Those people are the ones that are really running into trouble. And those are where I would say that's the most dangerous part of the aftermarket industry right now, is this influx, not of people trying to make a name for themselves in the industry. I want that. I want people to be smart. I don't want people to pretend they know something about something that they don't. Stop doing that.
So I'm going to go one step further to kind of add on to what you just said. And the only thing I'm going to say is, and this is something I felt for a long time, don't blame where it's from. No. What you need to blame are the people in this country that are the brand owners, the brand importers, the brand developers, or whatever it's going to be, because it doesn't matter. Listen, we bring only wheels in from our factories.
Yeah.
We still open a percentage of every wheel that we bring in from our own factories that have already done countless QC tests and different things like that, and we still check them.
Yeah.
The job and the burden falls on the people that you're buying the product from to be able to do the QC and verify that the specs that we set out for, the engineering that we've done, all the research that we've done, anything we've done to make this the real deal product is actually what happens when it comes in the box.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a lot of people think it's the factory's responsibility to deliver a finished product. And I hate to say it, it's not. It's not. It's the factory's job to manufacture a component. And if you don't have the QA there, and if you don't have boots on the ground checking 100%. Things out, and if you don't do that, and you're still asking for the cheapest dollar that you can possibly get,
you're screwed.
You're asking yourself for trouble. And that's this whole concept. I mean, I could take it even a step further. Like, I've done and manufactured and built my own wheel brand, and I've gone through those pains as a small business, and I remember thinking to myself the very opposite of what I just said. I'm like, we paid the money to this factory. Why aren't they doing it? Why am I doing it?
Why isn't it? Why aren't they doing this?
Yeah, and it's like the I'm sorry, but like
no, you're good.
You know, I went out and I read a book, and it was talking about the Six Sigma, and it was talking about lean management, and it had a story about how Ford and Chevy and all these manufacturers, they still have a defect rate. They still have a visual defect card that they use when they're on the production line, when they're looking at paint or when they're looking at a finish or a wheel, where they say, okay, if there's less than 3 scratches in this square footage of stuff, then it's still good. It's still rated an A, which means it's still it's not perfect. It still gets rated an A. But they still QA check it. And so what we did is we're like, well, shit, let's do that. Right. You know, if it meets this criteria, we know that 99.8 out of 100 are going to pass through that. And that's our responsibility. What happens...
I agree with that 1,000%. Your standard doesn't have to be a pre-developed standard. People get lost in JWL, VIA, J2530. These are wheel standards. Yeah. They give us a good benchmark for quality, but when it comes down to the overall product, it doesn't mean you have to stop there.
Yeah.
It means that that's the baseline to give somebody a ballpark understanding of where you strive and where you met your product at.
And that's what happened in Japan. I mean, a lot of brands in Japan did that too, where they realized, because they had the factory and the manufacturing, and they all have the testing all in-house because they just happen to be in Japan, where it's all... And they'll say, okay, well, JWL and VIA, let's say it's 200,000 rotations on a certain amount of pressure, whatever. And somewhere along the lines in 2003, somebody was like, make it 300 so that I can say that it's JWL plus VIA .E tested. And the .E is my brand's version of testing.
It's extra.
You know, and it's more. And everybody everybody now is like, dude, this thing is ultra, it's double rated, it's triple rated. It's like, you can set those up with the fact, if you want to, if you care that much, you can do anything you set your mind to. That's why I always say, if you really want to go out there and you really want to make a mark in the scene, you're not going to do it by just turning over somebody's product overnight. I'm sorry. It's a cool idea, but nothing worth earning happens quickly. Yeah. And I've watched so many of those companies burn out, and I've watched a lot of these exhaust companies get really close to that fire. And you want them to succeed, but unfortunately, they don't.
Right. Well, listen, I think we're getting the buzzer here.
I think we are,
I appreciate you coming here to hang out and kind of meet the people.
Of course.
That already know you, which is not really meeting anything. But, like, just being able to take the time at the show and kind of go through and talk about some stuff. I just think it's interesting because we both come from that wheel entire segment. So the idea of having us in the same building and being able to sit down with you and just kind of rattle some things off. Plus, you got some really cool things going on.
I appreciate that.
And I wanted to, wrap
up.
No,
we wouldn't be here without your support. We wouldn't be here without supporting, Koenig. I think it's always been a childhood dream of mine to be able. I remember walking in these doors in 2017, and I was scared as all hell. And I remember walking to, I think I met up with 45 different vendors, and I remember a handful of them laughed in my face as I was talking to them about wheel samples or getting them onboarded. And I remember that moment, and it was a really humbling feeling. I mean, I remember very specific manufacturers do that, and when I came to Koenig in 2017 and I did the pitch and I did the conversation, you guys sent wheel samples. Yeah. And I remember that meant the world to me. And even as, things grew and things exploded, and even after we restarted and we're like, we're going to do Martini Works and we're going to do it this way, when I came to you guys, you were all on board with the mission and the dream. And to me, that means the world, because if we can have partners that care about the industry and community like we do, it's perfect.
Thing.
And that's all we want.
Dude,
you know.
Thanks so much.
Of course. Appreciate it, man. Thank you.
Thanks for watching. We'll catch you in the next one.
Bye-bye.